Think that bag of rice sitting in your pantry is safe? Think again. A shocking nationwide investigation tested 145 rice products pulled from stores all across America, and the results were brutal. Every single sample contained arsenic. More than 1 in 4 crossed the FDA's action level for infant rice cereal. And it gets worse. Cadmium showed up in all but one sample. Lead and mercury were detected in more than a third. These aren't harmless trace mentions on a lab sheet. These are toxic heavy metals that can build up in the body over time, especially when rice is a weekly or daily staple. And the health consequences can be serious. We're talking higher long-term cancer risk, developmental harm, IQ impacts in children, and increased risk during pregnancy. Yet here's the part that should stop you cold. The FDA has an action level for arsenic in infant rice cereal, but there's still no federal limit for arsenic in the rice that families cook and eat every day. Today, I'm counting down the 8 rice brands and rice products you need to avoid starting now. I'll show you which products tested highest for contamination, which companies are now facing class action lawsuits, and why organic or premium doesn't automatically mean safer. And don't skip the end, because I'm also going to reveal the rice types that tested lower, plus simple cooking tricks that can cut arsenic dramatically, in some cases by up to 60%, using nothing more than water and the right method. If you eat rice regularly or you feed it to kids, this might be one of the most important videos you watch in 2026. Before we jump in, make sure you subscribe to Frugal Finds for You and turn on notifications, because we post straight-to-the-point breakdowns like this all the time, and you don't want to miss the next one. Let's get into it. Number 8. Trader Joe's Rice. Yes, the beloved grocery chain that markets itself as the safer, cleaner alternative to a typical supermarket. Their rice products were included in that nationwide investigation that tested 145 rice samples across more than 100 brands. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Trader Joe's rice products are not automatically safer than anyone else's. In this category, brand name means almost nothing when it comes to arsenic. What actually matters is the type of rice and where it was grown. Trader Joe's sources rice from multiple regions, including areas where contamination levels have repeatedly tested higher. And that's the part most shoppers never think about. You see the Trader Joe's logo, and you feel reassured, like the brand did the homework for you. But rice doesn't work like that. A huge chunk of American-grown rice comes from the southern United States: Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And those states have a problem that goes back more than a century. Before rice, many of those fields were used for cotton, and for decades, farmers used arsenic-based pesticides to fight pests in the cotton belt. That arsenic didn't vanish. It stayed in the soil. Now, picture what rice does. Rice is grown in flooded paddies. The water changes the chemistry of the soil in a way that helps arsenic move into the plant more easily. So the crop basically becomes a sponge for contamination that's been sitting there for generations. That's the tragedy. Trader Joe's customers think they're making a healthier choice. They trust the brand. They pay a little more. But if the rice is coming from the same high arsenic regions, they may be getting the same heavy metal load as a budget bag sitting 2 shelves down. And here's another issue. Trader Joe's doesn't publicly publish batch-by-batch arsenic testing results for its rice. The country of origin isn't always obvious to the average shopper on every package. So consumers can't easily tell whether they're buying rice grown in a higher risk region or a lower risk one. The lesson here is simple. Don't trust marketing. Don't assume premium means clean. Always check where your rice comes from and stay with me, because in the protection section at the end, I'm going to tell you exactly what origins and types tend to test lower. Number 7, Whole Foods 365 brand. And this one hits people differently because Whole Foods built its identity on better for you. Their 365 house brand is positioned as the affordable organic option for health-conscious shoppers. But independent reporting and analysis have pointed out a harsh reality about one specific product. Whole Foods, 365 long-grain brown rice has been highlighted as one of the worst performers in arsenic comparisons. Let that sink in. The store, famous for clean eating, had a rice option that showed up at the top of the problem list. And this is where the rice conversation gets tricky, because brown rice is often marketed as the healthier choice. More fiber, more nutrients, less processing. But brown rice also tends to hold more arsenic than white rice of the same type, because arsenic concentrates in the outer layers that are removed when rice is refined. So if you're buying brown rice because you're trying to do the right thing, you might actually be increasing the heavy metal exposure for yourself or your family, depending on where that rice was grown. The investigation that tested 145 samples again reinforced a bigger point. Health branding doesn't cancel out contamination risk. The grain doesn't care what store it's sold in. And when you zoom out, the situation gets even uglier. Whole Foods is owned by Amazon, one of the most powerful corporations on earth. We're not talking about a small local brand that can't afford better sourcing. This is a company with the resources to test, track, and label every batch if they wanted to. Instead, consumers are often left making guesses in the aisle, hoping the label means what it feels like it means. If you've ever bought 365 rice thinking you were choosing cleaner food, keep watching. Because coming up at number 6 is where the legal heat starts showing up in a way most people haven't even heard about. Number 6, Amazon Happy Belly Rice. Amazon doesn't just own Whole Foods, it also sells its own branded food products directly to your doorstep. And this category is now tied to major legal action. In May 2025, consumers filed a proposed class action lawsuit against Amazon in Seattle federal court. The core claim is simple, but serious. The lawsuit alleges Amazon sold rice products containing arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury without clearly warning consumers about the risk. The case names multiple rice products sold through Amazon, including some big, recognizable names and house brands. And it points back to the same nonprofit testing that found arsenic in 100% of the 145 rice samples purchased nationwide, with more than 1 in 4 exceeding the FDA's action level for infant rice cereal. Here's what makes this so alarming. These products aren't niche items. They're the exact kind of household staples families buy on autopilot. You click reorder, it shows up, you cook it, you feed it to your kids, and you never once imagine you're rolling the dice on a toxic exposure that builds silently over time. The lawsuit also highlights something that should make every parent pause. Children eat more rice per pound of body weight than adults do, which means the same bowl can translate to a larger dose relative to their size, while their brains and bodies are still developing. Amazon responded by trying to get the case dismissed. Part of the argument was basically that heavy metals in rice have been known about for years, and that the information was out there. In other words, the defense leans toward, people should already know. But here's the problem with that logic. Knowing something exists in theory is not the same as being told the product you're about to buy has it right now in meaningful amounts. That difference matters. And if you're thinking, okay, but Amazon is online, maybe it's an e-commerce issue, don't relax yet. Because number 5 is a brand sitting in over 4,700 physical stores, bought by millions of families every week. Before we hit it, quick reminder, if you want more consumer breakdowns that protect your wallet and your health, subscribe to Frugal Finds for You right now. It costs nothing, and it helps you stay ahead of the traps. Number 5, Walmart Great Value Rice. Great Value is everywhere. It's America's biggest private label line. And for a lot of families, Great Value isn't a choice. It's the only way the grocery budget works. Independent testing and reporting have repeatedly shown that Great Value rice can land around the national averages seen in many mainstream products. That means you're not necessarily looking at a freak outlier every time, but you are still looking at a category where arsenic is consistently present, and sometimes present at levels that would be considered unacceptable if it were sold as infant rice cereal. Here's what makes Great Value especially concerning. The brand is built for budget-conscious families. Those are often the same households most likely to have young children, and the same households most likely to rely on rice as a regular staple because it stretches meals. Rice becomes the filler, the side dish, the base, the leftover meal, the "we can always make rice" option. And when something is eaten that often, small risks stop being small. Another piece most shoppers never realize is sourcing. A lot of U.S. grown rice is sourced from southern states where arsenic contamination in rice tends to be higher compared to rice grown in places like California or certain imported varieties. Walmart has the power to do better. They have the leverage to demand better tracking, clearer labeling, and more transparency. They have the resources to test. But families on tight budgets don't get the luxury of shopping around for the cleaner option if it costs double. So they keep buying what's available. And that's why this problem isn't just about rice. It's about who gets exposed the most. The people who can least afford long-term health consequences are often the people carrying the most risk. Now, number 4 is where the story shifts, from store brands to a legacy rice empire. A company so big, you've probably eaten their rice without even realizing it. Number 4, Mahatma and Carolina rice. Riviana is one of the biggest rice companies in the United States, and it's tied to a global rice giant. These brands aren't new. They've been on American shelves for generations. They're the kind of names people trust because they feel familiar. Grandma used it, Mom used it, so it must be safe, right? But in June 2025, a class action lawsuit was filed against Riviana Foods, alleging their Mahatma Brown whole grain rice contained dangerous levels of arsenic and cadmium without adequate warning to consumers. According to the lawsuit and the testing referenced, the arsenic level in that product was reported at hundreds of parts per billion. And here's the comparison that makes people go quiet. The FDA's action level for inorganic arsenic in infant rice cereal is 100 parts per billion. So when you see a number several times higher than that tied to a rice product that families can buy off a shelf, it raises a serious question. The lawsuit also points to cadmium, which is another toxic heavy metal with links to long-term health harm, including kidney and bone issues. This is not the kind of thing anyone expects to come with dinner. And the sourcing story comes back again. A major portion of rice used in widely sold American products comes from the same southern regions where contamination has historically tested higher, due in part to the legacy of arsenic-based pesticides in the Cotton Belt. If you're thinking, okay, that's brown rice again, you're tracking the pattern correctly. Brown rice often tests higher. But don't think switching to flavored rice mixes gets you out of the danger zone, because number 3 is the entry almost nobody sees coming. Number 3, store brand seasoned rice mixes, especially cinnamon and spice blends. And yes, I said cinnamon, because this isn't just about the rice anymore. This is about what gets added to rice products, and how spices can carry their own contamination risk. In late 2023 and into 2024, federal investigators traced a disturbing spike in elevated blood lead levels in children to cinnamon used in certain food products. Testing found extremely high lead levels, far beyond what anyone should ever see in something meant for kids. Investigators pointed to evidence of economically motivated adulteration, meaning the contamination may not have been a simple accident. The theory was that lead chromate was added to make the cinnamon appear more vibrant, and weigh more, which is as horrifying as it sounds. Now here's why that matters for rice. Seasoned rice mixes often include spice blends, yellow rice mixes, cinnamon rice, saffron-flavored blends, street corn rice, Spanish rice, all of it. And if the spice supply chain is compromised, you can end up with a double hit. Arsenic from the rice itself, plus lead or other metals from the spice additives. One example highlighted in the analysis tied to these broader concerns showed that certain seasoned rice products can test significantly higher for lead than plain rice, depending on what's added and where it came from. So, if you're the type of shopper who grabs a discount seasoned rice bag because it's quick, cheap, and tastes better than plain rice, understand what you might actually be doing. You could be taking the baseline contamination risk of rice and stacking it with an additional risk from spices. This is why I tell people all the time, the danger isn't always what you see, it's what's mixed in. And if number 3 shocked you, keep watching, because number 2 is one of the most famous rice brands in America, and the sourcing story behind it is something most people have never been told. Number 2, Ben's Original Rice. This is one of the most recognizable rice brands in American grocery history. It's owned by Mars Incorporated, a massive, privately held company that owns a long list of household brands. And with that kind of size, you'd assume they could source rice from anywhere, from regions that test lower and label it clearly. But the big issue here is where a lot of mainstream American rice is grown. Southern rice-growing states have repeatedly tested higher for arsenic, and the reason goes back to that same legacy problem. The Cotton Belt, arsenic-based pesticides, contaminated soil that never really got cleaned. Here's the part that sounds unbelievable, but is real history. When rice began to be grown more widely on some of those lands, arsenic levels were a known issue. Over time, agricultural systems shifted. Rice varieties were developed and selected that could survive in those soils. The plant doesn't die, it grows, but the arsenic can still end up in the grain. Testing and reporting tied to the nationwide investigation found that arsenic contamination is widespread across brands, and big names are not exempt. That includes brands like Ben's Original, along with others you've seen in every store. This is where the trust issue hits. When a brand is that big, it can afford better choices. They can source from California-grown rice. They can bring in lower testing varieties from places like India or Thailand for basmati or Thailand for jasmine, depending on supply and standards. They can make safer sourcing, part of the brand promise. But if the product on the shelf is built around the cheapest large-scale supply chain, then consumers are the ones absorbing the hidden cost. Now, if you think number 2 is bad, number 1 is the true danger zone. Because it's the rice with the least accountability, the least traceability, and the widest swing from okay to off the charts. Number 1, generic unbranded rice. Here's why this tops the list. When you buy a major brand, there's at least a company name attached. They have reputations to protect. They can be pressured, they can be sued, they can be forced into recalls, reformulations, and transparency. But with generic rice, sometimes there's no clear accountability at all. You may not know where it was grown. You may not know who processed it. You may not know if it was ever tested for heavy metals. And the nationwide testing found that the widest variation in contamination can come from products where sourcing and oversight are less transparent. Some samples tested lower. Others tested much higher. That inconsistency is the nightmare, because it means you're gambling. And when the product is a staple, that gamble repeats every week. And there's another risk layer here. Cheap sourcing often points back to the same high-volume regions where contamination tends to test higher, because that's where the supply is cheapest. Or it can point to international sources where oversight, standards, or enforcement may vary, and where food adulteration scandals have happened before. If you remember the spice scandal, you already understand the pattern. When price becomes the only priority, bad actors appear. Corners get cut, testing gets skipped, and the consumer becomes the one paying the price with their body. The families most likely to buy generic rice are often the families most vulnerable to the consequences. Low-income households with kids. Immigrant families for whom rice is a cultural staple eaten multiple times a day. Communities that deserve the most protection often get the least information. Now, I promised you I wouldn't just scare you and leave you hanging. So let's shift to the most important part of this entire video: how to protect yourself. Now that you know which products to be cautious with, here's how to reduce your risk dramatically without giving up rice forever. First, choose your rice wisely. Not all rice is equally contaminated. California-grown rice has repeatedly tested lower in many comparisons, including certain sushi rice and Cal Rose-style varieties. imported jasmine rice from Thailand, and basmati rice from India, have also often tested lower than rice grown in the southern U.S., depending on the specific product and supply chain. So look for labels that clearly state California grown, or that clearly list the country of origin, like Thailand or India. Be cautious with labels that only say grown in the USA, because that can often mean the highest volume southern growing regions. The more specific the origin, the more control you have as a buyer. Second, change how you cook it. This is the game changer. Cooking rice in excess water, more like pasta, and then draining the extra water can significantly reduce arsenic. The method is simple. Use a lot more water than you normally would. Boil the rice, then drain the excess water before serving. Some testing and guidance suggest this approach can reduce arsenic by a major amount, in some cases up to around 60%, depending on the rice type and method. Pre-soaking rice for 30 minutes, or even overnight, then draining and cooking with excess water can reduce it even more. Rinsing alone helps a little, but soaking plus draining is where you get the bigger impact. And this is one of those rare moments where the fix doesn't cost more money. It just costs a little more attention. Third, diversify your grains. One of the smartest moves is simply eating rice less, often. Alternative grains like quinoa, barley, couscous, and farro have been found on average to carry far less arsenic than rice. Swapping even a few meals per week away from rice can cut your cumulative exposure over time. Try quinoa as a base for bowls. Use barley in soups. Do couscous with stews. Use farro in salads. The goal isn't to ban rice. The goal is to stop rice from being the default at every meal. Fourth, be especially careful with children. If you have infants or toddlers, be cautious with rice-based baby foods and rice cereals. The FDA's action level exists for infant rice cereal for a reason. Kids are smaller. Their brains are developing. Their exposure per pound can be higher. Consider oat, barley, or multigrain infant cereals instead of rice cereal. And if rice is in the rotation at home, use the cooking method that lowers arsenic, and rotate grains more often. Fifth, avoid processed rice products, rice cakes, rice crackers, rice-based snacks, and foods. Sweetened with brown rice syrup can concentrate arsenic in ways that make it harder to reduce. And here's the part most people don't know. Some high-heat processing steps can change arsenic chemistry in rice-based products. Research has identified compounds like DMMTA showing up in certain processed rice items. And early research suggests DMMTA could be even more toxic than forms people typically talk about with rice. That doesn't mean panic over every rice snack. It means don't live on them. And don't assume puffed or crispy automatically equals safe. Now, the rice industry doesn't like conversations like this. Industry groups have pushed the message for years that there's no public health issue here. But the science is clear on the basics. Arsenic is linked to cancer risk. It can harm developing brains. And there is no benefit to exposure. The bigger issue is regulation. The FDA has an action level for infant rice cereal, but there's still no federal limit for arsenic in the rice families eat every day. And testing showed more than 1 in 4 rice products can exceed that infant cereal action level. You deserve to know what's in your food. Your children deserve protection. And companies selling staple foods deserve to be held to higher standards than everyone already knows. If this video helped you, share it with a friend or family member who eats rice regularly, especially parents. And make sure you subscribe to Frugal Finds for you and turn on notifications, because our next breakdowns are going to cover more everyday foods that hide problems in plain sight. Drop a comment too. What rice brand do you buy most often? And did you check the origin label after watching this? Stay aware, stay sharp, and protect your plate.